NBA 2021 season just a few days away. What do the Clippers have to say about the Lakers this year making a lot of runs? Find out in this next episode of Sideline Sports Podcast. Welcome to Sideline Sports Podcast. If you're not on the sideline, it's not Sideline Sports Podcast. And welcome back to another installment of Sideline Sports Podcast. I'm the host, Alex Naveja, where if you're not on the sideline, it's not Sideline Sports Podcast, a source of all of your SoCal sports news. Unfortunately, Trojan season finished up very early. They came in with a 5-0 season on Friday night against Oregon. And I know I'm going to hear it a lot from Jonathan Rifkin last week, giving me a little bit of that headache. But USC not going to play in the bowl game and getting eliminated and not being the Pac-12 champion. But you know what? Let's talk about a more positive note. We've got Clippers basketball here in the house. We've got Justin Wilson himself, otherwise known as LA Clipper Films in Twitter. Justin, thank you so much for being on the show. How are you doing today?
I'm well. Thank you for having me on. That was a great intro. I need my energy to get on your level. That's great. But I'm happy to be here though. I'm happy that you reached out, and I'm happy to be on to talk some Clipper hoops.
Absolutely, man. It's a pleasure to have you. And I'll just tell you one thing. I do not drink coffee. And I think if you drink with coffee, I think you'd be like, hey, Alex, got to tone it down another level. It's not working type of thing. But you know what is working? This Clipper team. I mean, we're looking at a lot of familiar faces. We are seeing some new faces here for the Clippers. But as far as some of these free agencies that you're seeing and the moves that the Clippers have made, which one has been your favorite, Justin?
So they did a lot this offseason. They left out as Montrezl Harrell, out as Landry Shamet, and in is Luke Kennard, in is Nicholas Batum. My favorite though would probably be Serge Ibaka. He's a backup center from Toronto. He was on the Toronto Raptors championship team with Kawhi Leonard. He was a free agent this offseason. He got a 1-2-year deal. Second year was a player option. And I really think that he was the Clippers' biggest target in the offseason, and they got him. And he fills an exact need, and he's a big reason why I'm so optimistic for the Clippers this season. The Clippers, in my estimation, really suffered in the playoffs last year at that backup center position. And next to Ivica Zubac, who is another young, promising center that the Clippers have on their roster right now, Serge Ibaka complements him really, really well. And I think his three-point shooting, his shot blocking, he's not the defensive player that he once was, but he's still really good. I think he's my favorite. He's my favorite, and I look forward to seeing him in the Clippers uniform this year. The Clippers also traded for Luke Kennard this year, and a lot of people didn't watch the Detroit Pistons last year, and he was injured last year. But when he was on the floor last year, Luke Kennard was really, really good, and I think he can do some really, really good things in the offseason. And he had a really good preseason game Thursday night for the Clippers, and I'm looking forward to what he brings to the table.
Absolutely. I honestly was not surprised when I heard about the Serge Ibaka signing, especially with, this is a guy Kawhi has previous experience with. And you know what, Kawhi, he had a great chemistry with that Toronto Raptors team. And now you know it better than I do that chemistry was an issue during the playoffs, which is what played in a huge factor in the Clippers making it a Lakers-Clippers NBA Western Conference final there. But, I think the Clippers made the right move, letting Harrell walk because of those chemistry issues, and bringing in somebody that Kawhi is 100% cool with, Serge Ibaka. And Serge Ibaka still has that dominant presence in the paint. I think any guard should still be aware if you're trying to find a lane and you see Serge Ibaka there in the paint, I still think you should be terrified of him. But a couple of other moves we saw the Clippers re-signing Marcus Morris to come back.
Yeah.
We also saw Patrick Patterson also coming back, and then you mentioned Nicholas Batum also, and then Reggie Jackson also coming back as a Clipper. And then, of course, we're missing the big signing from the Clippers, re-signing the big fella himself, Paul George.
Yeah, I mean, he had an up and down, uneven playoff run last year, but I think he's an extremely, extremely talented player. I still think he's a top 10 player in the league right now, and he's just 30, and he's finally healthy. He had a healthy offseason, and at the end of the day, you're still getting a guy who's 6'9", that can dribble, shoot, and pass and make 40% of his threes off the dribble. And you just can't find that in the NBA. That's a very rare skill set. And so for the Clippers to lock that down was one of the best things that happened to them this offseason. And hopefully Paul George, with that contract being secured and locked down, he can come into the season with a fresh mind, playing free, and hopefully get back to that MVP level form that he was at his last year with the Oklahoma City Thunder. I'm a huge Paul George fan, and I think it's kind of cliche, but he is the key towards the Clippers hopefully dethroning the Lakers and winning the championship. A lot of it has to do with how good can Paul George be this year, and I'm optimistic that he's going to have a breakout year this year.
I really think it's got to be that matching duo of Kawhi and Paul George if they really want to put a stop to the Lakers and that run that they put on last year. And I think it's up to them. If they want to make a statement to the Lakers this year with all the moves they've made, it's just a matter of getting those two guys on a roll and really getting, I think, some sort of way of getting Serge Ibaka into that as well. Now, going into the free agency, right when the clock struck free agency time, which move were you saying that the Clippers have to make?
Well, I was vocal about the backup center position as the playoffs were happening. I thought it was very clear that the Clippers were going to have to move on from Montrezl Harrell. He just wasn't good enough as a backup center for the Clippers. And quite frankly, he cost them. A lot of people on Clipper Twitter were seeing it in real time as it happened. And the Clippers were right to let him go. So for me, the moment the clock struck 12 and the moment we got into free agency, that was the move to try and shore up the backup center position, because I am a huge Zubac fan, but you can't play him all 48 minutes. And you needed somebody that could play in the playoffs. And I don't think Montrezl Harrell at this point in his career can be a backup center on a championship contending team. I think the Lakers will find that out too. But for the Clippers, they saw it that he just wasn't the answer. And I felt like Ibaka was immediately the target. He was the target. He was the player the Clippers had to get in free agency. He was their biggest weakness. That backup center spot was their biggest weakness. And I'm just happy and thankful that the Clippers were able to fully address that backup center position. And it's one of the big reasons why I'm optimistic for their chances this year.
You said it just right there, Justin. But Clippers making a lot of pretty good free agency moves, bringing in new faces and bringing in some very familiar faces for the Clippers. I mean, with the team that they had already, they didn't need to make any real lot of additions except for a player or two for the team. But we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the preseason action for the Clippers and talk a little bit about which players are standing out to Justin early on here in this preseason. So if you're not on the sideline, it's not Sideline Sports Podcast, a source of all of your SoCal sports news. We'll be right back.
This is Kyra Boncho Smith, hip hop artist and men's basketball player, and you're watching Sideline Sports Podcast.
And welcome back to the second half of Sideline Sports Podcast. Again, I'm the host, Alex Naveja. And if you're not on the sideline, it's not Sideline Sports Podcast, a source of all of your SoCal sports news. And again, with me today is Justin Wilson, also known as LA Clippers Films. You guys should know him if you're a Clipper fan. And if you don't, here he is right here, right next to me. And make sure to give him a follow. I'll put all of his stuff down in the description below. But you know what, Justin? Something I forgot to mention in the first half. And I hope you feel extra special because it is Sideline Sports Podcast, episode 60.
All right.
So, yeah.
All right. 60 episodes.
There you go,
You
man.
can put in work.
Hey, you're making some history, man. Making some history, and you were in episode number 60. So, again, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you. Thank you. Happy to make some history, and hopefully the Clippers make some history this season as well. Some positive history, I should say.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the Clippers, they're going into preseason play. I mean, people thinking, oh, they're 0-3. That doesn't look promising. That doesn't look good. But, I mean, hey, it's just preseason. I mean, these starters, these guys, they play a couple minutes, sit on the bench, and just take in the rest of the game. But despite them losing 2 games against the Lakers and against the Jazz, what have you been seeing with this Clippers squad so far?
I've noticed that, they have a new coaching staff, and that's one of the biggest additions in this off season was they revamped their entire coaching staff. They've got Ty Lue, they've got Larry Drew over there, they've got Dan Craig from the Miami Heat over there, they've got Chauncey Billups over there. So it's a brand new coaching staff. And you kind of saw it. Like if for me, at least, when I watched them throughout this preseason, they were trying a whole lot of new stuff, and it looked rough, but to me, that's kind of par for the course because with a new coaching staff, you're implementing a new offense, you're implementing a new defense, you're implementing new principles. So it did look rough at times, but to me, there was nothing to be concerned about because that was, you know what I mean? That's what happens when you're in the preseason and you got a entire new coaching staff and you're trying to implement new players and things like that. So they looked a little rough on both ends of the floor, but I'm actually happy because it's happening now. And they play the Lakers and the Nuggets next week. And I'm sure there are going to be moments there where it's going to be rough, but that's because they have a new coaching staff and they're implementing a new system. And so I caution all Clipper fans to really just take it easy and relax because the team is going to take off once they fully embrace what Ty Lue is doing. And I think that's really what you're seeing in the preseason is just a new team trying to get acclimated to its coach. But that being said, I saw some good moments from Serge in the first preseason game against the Lakers. He hit 2 threes, and that's kind of what you want to see from him this year. And the last preseason game, Luke Kennard really showed what he could be for the Clippers as far as being that playmaker out of pick and roll, making step back threes, being a secondary playmaker and stuff like that. And also their second year big, Mfiondu Kabengele, they drafted him last year. You didn't see much of him at all last year. I don't think he didn't play much at all. But they're looking at him as maybe being somebody that could be in the rotation this year. And he showed some signs against Rudy Gobert last on Thursday. And so that was exciting. He's a big, a 6'10" center that can make some threes. He can protect the rim. He has a nice motor. He sometimes looks like he shouldn't be an NBA player, but I thought that Thursday night was one of the first real moments where it looked like he could be somewhat productive for the Clippers at some point this season. So Mfiondu Kabengele, Luke Kennard, some Serge Ibaka, and Paul George has looked really, really smooth and special throughout this preseason. Those would be the people that stood out to me the most.
I think the Clippers are going to make a pretty good run this year. And I think with that new coaching staff, I think there's going to be some downhill moments as every new coaching staff, it happens all the time. You're gonna run into some downhill slopes because this is a team that's still trying to get the hang of each other, still trying to get the hang of the new offense, the new defensive system
Right.
he's talking about. So it's normal if you see the Clippers go downhill, but that's not gonna take them out of the Western Conference or anything. These guys are gonna be easily top 5, easily up there with the Lakers. And I still feel like the Clippers still have a lot what it takes. And they have that superstar duo like we were talking about in that first half of Kawhi and Paul George. And they have the core to be able to keep up with these Western Conference superpowers that they have. But what do you think has been the stronghold for the Clippers? Like, what has been the best part of the Clippers? Is it defense? Is it the offense, 3-point shooting, rebounds? What are you seeing?
I'm kind of the biggest emphasis that I see is Ty Lue's impact as far as shooting. So with the Cleveland Cavaliers, he placed a supreme emphasis on 3-point shooting. And as a result, the Cavaliers were one of the best offenses in the league with Ty Lue as the coach. And they were towards the top of the league in 3-point attempts, 3-point makes, and things like that. So in his first year with the Clippers, he's already showing that by making Serge Ibaka the starting center instead of Ivica Zubac. Serge is someone obviously who can stretch to the 3-point line. He had a career year last year, 15 a game, over 37% from the 3-point line last year. So I think that's probably the biggest thing that jumps off the page to me is that Ty Lue is somebody that is going to make sure that the Clippers increase their 3-point rate. And for a team with such great shooting between Patrick Beverley, Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, Serge Ibaka, you're looking Lou Williams, even Luke Kennard. They just have a ton of really good shooters. And I'm looking forward to seeing Ty Lue kind of exacerbate that and get them towards the top 10 in the league in 3-point attempts and 3-point makes. And if they do, they'll be an even better offense than they already were last year.
And especially if you have the two best closers in the game. I mean, you have Kawhi and you have Lou Williams. I love Lou Williams when he was with the Lakers. And you know what? I think he's even better now as a Clipper. Mm-hmm. So when it comes to the fourth quarter, these guys, they put it into sixth gear. And it's lockdown defense. They score like 20 points in the fourth quarter. And those guys can really flip the switch on you and really just switch it up. Like the Clippers could be down going into the fourth quarter, but by the end of it, Clippers just have their way with you and they just beat you to it because you have the two best closers in the game. So with that being said, where do you see the Clippers finishing this year?
So I am a Clipper guy, but I try to not be biased. I think they can finish first in the Western Conference just because of the way they lost last season. They're probably going to come into this season with a chip on their shoulder. They've got to stay COVID free. They've got to stay healthy. If they can get some good luck with their health, I think they can finish first in the West. As far as actually winning the championship, we'll see. Right now, the Lakers are the favorites, as they should. You know, they've got 2 top 5 players on their team. But the Clippers, I think, have the potential to beat the Lakers so long as guys like Kawhi Leonard and Paul George handle their business and they become top 5, top 6 players in the NBA. And if you do that, and if they become that as a tandem, then the margin between Kawhi and Paul George and LeBron and AD becomes much closer. And that's when the Clippers can actually seriously talk about winning the championship. But I have them right under the Lakers right now. The Lakers won the championship. They get that respect. But it's a long season. We've got 72 games to go starting next week. And I'm so excited for that. And it's going to be a journey. It's a marathon. And we'll see if the Clippers can ultimately usurp the Lakers, because the Lakers are the favorites. They're right now, if I had to pick a championship winner today, it'd be the Lakers. But I think the Clippers have a shot. I think they have a real shot. And if they stay healthy, and if Paul George returns to MVP level form, they could be dangerous. They can be dangerous. They're going to be really good, but Can they be at that championship level? We'll see. They've got a new coaching staff that they've got to integrate. They've got Paul George. He's got to come back to that MVP level form. I liked what I saw from him in the preseason in regards to that. So we'll see.
It's going to be a fun season to watch, definitely. I think the Clippers are still going to be in second place. I still think maybe the Denver Nuggets can be a team that could still, be right on their tail and, still try to make that case for being second in the Western Conference. But the Clippers just have too many weapons on that team, and I still feel like they'll be atop of the Nuggets. But as far as the Lakers, I still don't see the Clippers surpassing them. But when it comes down to the matchups of Lakers and Clippers, it's definitely must-watch basketball there. And speaking of must-watch basketball, this Tuesday, December 22nd, Lakers, Clippers, to finish off the podcast. Who comes up as the victor?
I think it's the Clippers. I think it's the Clippers, and it's the first game of the season. It literally doesn't mean anything. The Lakers will get their banner. They'll get their championship rings, and normally championship teams come out flat on opening night. They come out flat on opening night. I think that the Lakers are coming off of a really short off season. I mean, their season just finished like nine weeks ago, basically.
Wow.
And, right. Like their season ended in the end of October, and they're starting their new season right now. So I don't think they're fully acclimated to this season yet, whereas the Clippers have been resting for a little bit longer. They've gotten more reps, and they'll be more hungry and motivated because it's the first game of the season and they lost in the playoffs. They'll have more of a chip on their shoulder. So I think the Clippers will get them on opening night, but I don't think it means absolutely anything at all towards a championship. But Lakers-Clippers is always fun. They played 4 times last year, and every game was close. The season series went 2-2. So it's very competitive. The players get into it. It's just fun. It'll just be fun to see LeBron, AD, Kawhi, Paul George all on the same floor. You've got the Montrezl Harrell thing going from the Clippers to the Lakers. So it'll be a fun matchup. I have the Clippers winning that one, but I don't think it'll amount to much of anything. And I normally don't evaluate how teams look until within like the first 15 to 20 games of the season anyway. So just to get that sample size in. So we'll see. But I got the Clippers open tonight.
I'm probably going to have to go against you, and I think the Lakers can make a case. Again, there's always going to be that argument in sports where, hey, the Lakers they have less rest under their belts, but they always say the team that has played more recently, or the team that, you know what I'm talking about, when they have played more recently, they usually have more of the advantage. Or there's that argument, is more rest better than someone that just played? And of course, in sports, it's always going to go back and forth. But I think the Lakers will probably start off, because I think they played relatively well during the preseason, even though they didn't really use their core too much. It was mainly bench guys that were playing and such. And I think the Lakers really do have a case. But you know what, Justin? You and me will be in contact definitely Tuesday night. You guys can catch that game on TNT on 7 p.m. Make sure to catch that one. Lakers, Clippers. Who do you guys got? Make sure to put your comments down below, whether it's going to be Lakers or the Clippers that are going to take that one on opening night. But that's all the time we have left here on Sideline Sports Podcast. We thank you all so much for tuning into this one. If you guys enjoyed this episode, please give it a thumbs up. Also hit the subscribe button down below. That's why we were able to get Justin Wilson himself from LA Clipper Films. And of course, thank you so much, Justin, for coming onto the podcast. Thank you.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
And of course, you guys can follow him on his Twitter account. I'll put his social media handle down in the description below, so you guys can make sure to not miss any Clippers content, any Clippers information. This guy is full of knowledge. You don't want to miss out on what he's got to say about the Clippers and his insight. So that's going to wrap things up. I'm Alex Naveca from Sideline Sports Podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in, everybody. Have a happy holidays to each and every one of you guys. Make sure to stay safe.